Hello, 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 beautiful souls. It's your show host, Regina Huber from Transform Your Performance with the same website, transformyourperformance.com. And today I'm again live from Miami Beach, Florida, North America. I am an adventurous, eclectic nomad. So you may see me in different locations as we move along in the show together from time to time. Although right now I'm a bit more local here for various reasons here in Miami Beach. And at other times I'm going to move around a lot again. I really love movement. I have moved so many times in my life and to far off places, but I also love movement like in dance. And dancing is one of my favorite passions. It gives me a sense of freedom. It gives me pleasure. It gives me so much. It's just almost undescribable. And that's why I have titled this show, Dance is Life, Life is a Dance. And because for me, life is like a dance. It's one of my big passions. It gives me this sense of freedom, this sense of movement. And that's so important to me because I'm a free spirit and all I do is in the service of freedom. The freedom to speak up, to stand out and shine, as the title of my book says, Speak Up, Stand Out and Shine. It's on Amazon. I'm very, very grateful that my travels have allowed me to broaden my horizon and to open my mind and to increase my spirit of freedom. But not only that, these travels have also brought all these new dance styles into my life. Whether I am doing them myself or whether I get to appreciate them as a viewer in the audience. So wherever I moved, I've always picked up some of the local dance and then some. But more about that in a bit. My eclectic life and experience on 5 continents has allowed me to become a multicultural and multilingual transformational leadership coach and inspirational speaker. And while I was traveling and living on different continents in different countries and cities, I have seen an infinite variety of sparkling brilliance in people all over the world. Also, in dancers. So I have made it my mission for this show to inspire you to ignite a flame wherever your path leads you and to really fuel that flame and keep it burning, turn it into a strongly burning fire so you can shine your brightest light and increase your influence and impact as a dancer, as a leader, and in whatever capacity you want to do that. Yeah, so you can shine your brightest light out to the world and we can benefit from it. And in this way, you can then also hopefully increase your bank account and your income. Your impact is so needed in this world. Your impact is a value-driven leader. Again, in whatever capacity, in whatever industry, it doesn't matter. A leader that stands up for the freedom of humans in your very own way. Could be in the form of a dance performance. Value-driven leaders need courage, and a great sense of freedom helps for that too, right? So we really are looking for the boldness in you, the boldness to live a free life, a value-driven life. So are you up for that today? Freedom of thought. Financial freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of choice, freedom to do what you came here to do and to live your purpose. And last but not least, the freedom of movement, also in dance. movement like in dance. Yes. So I like to say life is a dance, dance is life. And again, that is today's show title. Life is a dance, dance is life. Today, I want you to come on a journey with me. I'm going to take you with me if you allow me to. And so I want to ask you to allow me to share my stories about dance as I've been moving from country to country and continent to continent. And I hope that sounds like fun to you. It all started in Munich. No, wait, actually, it started in the village I grew up in. Because as a little girl, I didn't know much about dance apart from, watching some dance competitions on TV from time to time. There was not a lot at the time, but I did join the local Bavarian folkloric group. That was like a very special experience. It's not my cup of tea anymore these days, but we go through life and make different experiences, and they were certainly an interesting experience. So yeah, but I almost forgot about that. So I was all dressed up in the local gear then to do those dance performances on those local theater stages. And yeah, it was funny. I never have done it again ever since. And then during my teenage years, we would typically only dance in clubs. Yeah, and I was never into the disco stuff. There were no dance lessons where I grew up. And we would just dance to, for example, I don't know, The Clash, any reggae bands and such, right? But it wasn't really sophisticated dancing, to say the least. And later, during my college years in Munich, I traveled to the Dominican Republic for a vacation. I traveled by myself. I didn't even speak Spanish then, but it was still a lot of fun, piecing it all together with a little French and English and whatnot, and sign language, right? And I did a lot of dancing, and dancing has its own language. There's no need to talk, right? That's the beauty of dancing. There's so much communication in dancing. Body language, energetic language, intention. So much. And that's when I fell in love with Latin rhythms like merengue and salsa. So I started going to some salsa events there. We were often dancing on the beach. Then I moved back to, or not I moved, I flew back to Munich, and I took some salsa. I took up salsa there as well. I didn't really take classes, but I did go to events and just check it out. And I also took my first Brazilian samba classes, like samba no pé, like the samba that you see in Brazilian carnival. Yes. But for salsa, it was actually only in Madrid that I went dancing more regularly, and just really loved the Madrid nightlife. It's so lively. Everybody's in the streets in the summer all night. And there's nothing like it in the entire world, although it might have changed quite a bit in recent years, very sadly so. And in Madrid, I also added some other rhythms to my Latino repertoire, like cha-cha and bachata, which was still very, very limited to certain neighborhoods. But so the bachata, it wasn't as popular as it is now. But it existed. And eventually I also took Argentine tango classes for the first time in Madrid. Oh, and not to forget, I did take also some flamenco classes, not very many, because I was just really busy with my work. But I quickly noticed that that would have taken too much of my time, because I worked such long hours back then. So I needed a little bit of a lighter version of that, which I found in the sevillanas. That doesn't mean that sevillanas don't require practice. Oh, well, they do. If you've ever tried it, you know that. They absolutely do. But you can do it, learn it a little bit quicker. than the rest of the flamenco, I found at least. So you learn a specific sequence of 4 parts, and people dance at a lot of parties. And I was often like put a little bit on the spot or into the spotlight, you could say, because I had a colleague, and at the office party, she would always come up to me and say, hey, you know, you don't escape this. Come on, let's dance some Sevillanas. And she really loved Sevillanas because she was from Seville. And of course, while living in Spain, you cannot not pick up the Spanish rumba. The rumba is everywhere, and the basic rumba is way easier than the whole other flamenco range. So not a lot of flamenco dancing for me in Spain, but I deeply enjoyed watching it at shows, especially the more casual ones. And I remember some specific spots in the beautiful city, historic city of Madrid, where I took visitors at times as well. So I really love this city. It's so majestic and immensely beautiful in character. And funnily, I took flamenco classes again later in San Francisco, California. I never was really great at flamenco, and by now I've forgotten basically all of it or most of it. But it was great training for body and mind. And you cannot really worry while dancing flamenco, or while, you know, you just don't have, while dancing any of those dance practices, really the challenging ones, because there's no brain space left for it while doing it. So it's really wonderful brain relaxation that in that sense, or mindfulness work, I should say, rather, because it's not, the brain isn't really relaxed. It's quite challenging. But see, this is the great thing about challenging dances. They require you to focus so much on your body and your energy and the steps and sequences and movements and whatnot, that you don't really have time to think about anything else while doing them, such as worries or, you know, or other fear charged thoughts. So after 7 years in Madrid, I moved to Brazil for just a few months this time, for about 5 months, to help BCG open an office in Sao Paulo. I was working at the Boston Consulting Group at the time. And I'd already learned Portuguese because we'd also opened an office in Lisbon, Lisbon, Portugal. And I was traveling back and forth between Madrid and Lisbon for quite a few years. But of course, I spoke European Portuguese at the time. And for those of you who do speak Portuguese, you know that that's very different from Brazilian Portuguese, just as a side. Anyway, once in Sao Paulo, I wanted to dance samba again, but I wanted to do a partner dance that I had briefly caught a glimpse of before in Munich while I was doing the samba no pé dances, and it was called a samba de pagode, which is also a very specific type of samba born in Rio de Janeiro in the 1970s. So it's both the music and that specific type of a samba dance. That was my ice cube in my water glass. Did you hear that? It's funny. So I loved my classes so much. I loved those classes. And even though I didn't get to go dancing that much during those 5 months in Brazil, because again, for work reasons, and I wasn't really so familiar with the local scene, and I still had so much fun with it. But I did get to do some other fun stuff there with my colleagues, so definitely no complaints. Sao Paulo was then followed for me by a couple of weeks in Buenos Aires with a little tango again, and then I moved back to Munich for a couple of years, and that's when I resumed my samba no pé lessons with an awesome instructor in Munich who was from Brazil as well. And I also, and socially, I was mostly dancing Latin rhythms again, like salsa and all of those rhythms that go together at those events, right? And the Argentine tango as well at other events. So there were lots of great salsa parties in Munich at the time, many more than when I'd left for the first time for Madrid. Soon enough, I moved abroad again, and this time to Buenos Aires, Argentina. And even before, I had started translating books on Argentine tango from Spanish and sometimes from lunfardo, which is the Argentinian Spanish version of Pidgin English. And I translated those books to German. So that was because I'd met a guy on a previous trip to Argentina who published these books. And I must have translated in total over like 10 books on Argentine tango. I can't even remember exactly, plus one about the Argentinian mate, the mate beverage. So now I was back to tango and its sisters, the milonga and the tango waltz. For those who don't know, milonga is not just the name of the dance, but also the name of the venue where tango is danced. See, dance teaches us so much about the culture of its origin, where it comes from, right? It teaches us about people's behaviors. It teaches us about the culture, about habits, customs. And translating these books was fascinating too, because it gave me insights into so many aspects of the history of tango and what the lyrics really meant, most of which were in lunfardo. So you cannot just translate tango lyrics word by word. You got to examine every word to see if it has a double meaning. As if translating song lyrics from Spanish to German wasn't really challenging enough already, right? So I also now had to consult lunfardo dictionaries to make sure I captured the correct meaning of many of these words. And it's not just like, you know, translating lyrics isn't just like translating any text, any other text anyway, because it has to fit with the cadence, right? The musical cadence of rhythm of the entire song in a way. You know, the translation into German tends to be longer than the text in Spanish or English as well. So language, another really interesting and insightful aspect of human culture, right? So dance has taught me so much, so many lessons for business and leadership as well. And at some point, I also want to give you some of those in a different show, because there's so many that wouldn't fit into this show. But let's move on in my life of dance. Now, about 8 months after moving to Argentina, at that time around, a currency crisis hit the country, and the startup I was working for could no longer pay for training, which I was responsible for. So I was sent to Sao Paulo to do a temporary sales job for a couple of months. And after that, I was offered a job at BCG again for the San Francisco office. And I had left BCG to move to Argentina, but now they were hiring me back. And so I spent a few more months in Germany to wrap up a few things. And then in November of 2001, I landed in San Francisco, where I stayed for 3.5 years. In San Francisco, there was a lot of salsa, mainly Cuban salsa, and I met a very dear friend and salsa instructor, Ramon Ramos, also, and I took some classes with him. And you know, I occasionally also tango danced, mostly the modern style, tango nuevo, and I took some samba and African Cuban dance classes as well. So African Cuban was new to me at the time. And on Friday nights, I'd often go to dance at an African restaurant in the Mission District where I lived, just a few blocks from where I lived. And they would play a mix of hip hop and African and Caribbean zouk. Now, there were always lots of eager dancers there, and I had so much fun there because I always got to dance so much. And actually, what's funny is I met one of my 2 significant others during my San Francisco time there, and he was, or rather is, from Cameroon. So anyway, moving on, because my dance history doesn't stop here in San Francisco, where, by the way, I also took flamenco classes again, as I said earlier, right? From San Francisco, I moved back to Argentina, this time for several years, and to open up my own business. And which this meant I was going back to tango, but also to Brazilian zouk, because I think I didn't mention that, but I'd taken some Brazilian zouk classes while I was in Argentina before, and And that's when I met another great friend and dance instructor, Claudio de Oliveira from Brazil. And I later took him to a stage in Germany where he performed for an audience, all the different dances he does. And we even danced a little Zouk dance on stage together. That was fun too. Nothing choreographed, just a little, impromptu performance, fun stuff. Anyway, I went back to study Brazilian Zouk with him, and my body isn't really made for Brazilian Zouk, I would say. But because the classes were with Claudio, I did it anyway. It was so much fun. So then in Argentina, I also learned some traditional folk classes like the Argentinian Samba with the Z and the Chacarera. These are very central dances, even though they don't have the tango embrace or the partner dance embrace. You could say it's a little like Spanish Sevillanas, where two people dance together without that dance embrace. It's a little bit like seducing each other through dance. But Buenos Aires, to me, was also where I believe I took my first Samba de Gafieira steps. Samba de Gafieira is pretty much what took me eventually to Rio de Janeiro 3.5 years later. During my last year in Buenos Aires, I traveled to Rio several times to dance and take classes of Samba de Gafieira. And eventually I decided to sell my property in Argentina, give up my business there, and move to Rio de Janeiro. So I was now back to speaking Portuguese. In Rio, again, I added other Brazilian dances to my repertoire, such as the bolero, forró, the soltinho. And these were the typical rhythms they play at their dance socials or also at bigger events, in addition to the Samba de Gafieira, which was always my favorite. And I took a lot of Samba de Gafieira classes because it's really hard dance and similar to Argentine tango. And in Rio, I also took some Afro-Brazilian classes, super rich in culture, learning so much about the orishas and more, I should say orishas and more. And and some of my favorite dance instructors in Rio were Rodrigo Marquez, Hugo, and I also took a few classes with Leo Fortes and some others. As to the partner dances, though, apart from Samba de Gafieira, I learned apart from Samba de Gafieira, which was really the only one, I learned the other Brazilian dances pretty much on the dance floor. See, tango and Samba de Gafieira taught me so much sensitivity to rhythm and to the lead of my dance partners, the different styles, because you have to react so fast in samba that made it really easy for me to pick up the not so challenging dance styles directly on the dance floor. No classes necessary. The same, sorry, my voice. The same is pretty much true of Angolan kizomba and semba, with an E this time, semba, which I took up after moving to New York City. Yeah, I did a kizomba workshop to learn the basics in the beginning and get a feel for it, but the rest happened pretty much on the dance floor. Same as for Caribbean Zouk and Haitian Compa. I love Haitian Compa and I love Angolan Samba. But back to Rio de Janeiro. So Rio is a very rough city in a way, crime-wise, right? And it was also tough for me business-wise with a which is a very long story and which you can learn about in the many podcast interviews that I have done and talked about this story. But and then those links of the podcast interviews, you can find them on my website on the About page of transformyourperformance.com. But I really love this place, because it's also one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen and lived in. The tropical vegetation, the beach, the Lapa area, nightlife, the carnival, the culture, the capoeira players, the dancing. It's just a dream. And I really didn't think I would ever move away from there. See, most tourists to Rio de Janeiro don't even make it beyond Copacabana or Ipanema beaches, but these are certainly amazing areas, and also it's great to visit the Sugarloaf and whatnot, or a Casa de Samba, but that's not all of Rio. Yeah, I mean, it's a lovely part of it, but there's so much more. You have seen nothing of Rio if you don't also go downtown, outside the city, go to the floresta, the rainforest, go to other parts of the city to learn a little bit more about how people actually really live. And by the way, if you don't know what Samba de Gafieira is, check it out. Maybe watch some videos on YouTube. There are so many. Some of my favorite dancers are on there as well. So Rodrigo Marquez and Carol Vinanova, or Hugo Roberto, or Leo Fortes and Robertinha. So maybe start with those. There's so many more. After 3.5 years in Rio, my life seems to go a little bit in 3.5 year cycles. It seems, or 7 year cycles. I don't know. Although I think I broke that pattern recently, actually. Well, oh well. Anyway, so after I moved to New York City, new beginnings also with dance. Although I did go back to salsa first, lots of salsa in New York City, and this time New York style, which is different. Like New Yorkers dance on two, the dance in line, not so much the Cuban style there. Although there are some spots where you can also dance Cuban. And at the time, bachata was also very popular in New York, and that's how I met another significant other in my life. Isn't that interesting? And he's, you guessed it, Dominican. So soon I found out about the kizomba and compa scene, and I switched most of my attention to Angolan kizomba and samba, of which I actually prefer samba. And again, that's samba with an E, which these events were also the DJs were also mixing in Haitian compa and lots of that's because probably lots of Haitians dance kizomba. So soon I met who was going to be my best friend while I was in New York City, a Haitian guy with whom I went dancing to lots of compa events, also those in Long Island or Brooklyn, where I was literally always only the only pale-faced person, because it was only Haitians usually, and we would go there. My Haitian friend loved these events because we had those live concerts, those old traditional Haitian bands that were visiting from Haiti a couple of times a year or so, and yeah, so we would dance all night long until the very end, really making the best use of every single song, right? And I literally no longer feel my feet after those events. And I take the first train back to Manhattan and fall into my bed exhausted around 6 a.m. in the morning, but also as the happiest dancer soul, that's for sure. We also went to other events together, like the more modern compa events in downtown Manhattan. And these evenings out with Chris, with my friend, were always the highlights of the month for me, just to say the truth. So I had a lot of other really amazing dance experiences in New York as well. In New York, I also took West African dance classes and also later Afrobeat and house dance and Congolese and Dombolo classes. The house dance and Afrobeat classes were some of the toughest workouts I've ever done. I really miss those so much. Dombolo is also in that category of really, being very strenuous. And that's really also what stirred my passion. Those classes were what stirred my passion for contemporary Congolese music. And I think Dombolo and goes straight into my veins. I really love it. This also happens with Angolan samba and Haitian compa. Isn't that interesting? There must have had some past lifetimes in these places. I just wish I'd also brought the Dombolo's dance skills with me into this lifetime, because it's a really hard dance to learn for me, although I really love it. So it's more the contemporary form of Congolese dance anyway, so maybe it wasn't available in that lifetime back then. So I'm still doing Dombolo classes online now with Nkumo Katalai, and I just must say, it was just so much more fun in person, like most things in life, and also to do it in group and individually as well, but in person. So during my many travels to the African continent, I then also picked up other dances, and I more so in the audience really than dancing them actively myself. And I want to definitely talk more about that next time. But there's so much to talk about today that we are already almost out of time. So just, again, you see that to me, truly life is a dance and dance is life. And doesn't that also tie back to freedom, our topic of the last few shows? I think so. The freedom to take life less seriously and to find more joy in it. And with that said, I hope to see you next Wednesday, same time, same place, when I'll introduce a special guest to you again, unless anything unexpected happens, of course, which I don't think it will. But so hopefully we can have a guest on again next week, surprise guest. And soon I'll also talk more about the rest of what I saw in Africa, on the African continent, in these different countries, and my adventures there in the world of dance. But also those lessons that dance taught me, because I think we can all learn from those. And I'll definitely make a note of that for a future show. In the meantime, as always, keep shining your brightest light, sparkle away like the precious pearl you are, because the world is your oyster.